thank you, and I move the amendment in my name. The warm words from the Cabinet Secretary are cold comfort when they are not followed up with government action to help food producers, farmers, coastal communities and rural areas. So today, I will try to pick apart some of the glaring inconsistencies between the SNP's words and their actions. Then I will move to the positive steps we could take as a Parliament to secure a sustainable food supply for Scotland. Unfortunately, their motion today has made it clear again that the SNP government is more interested in stoking division than doing anything positive to help rural communities. When the SNP government has nothing positive to say, out come the excuses. Every other sentence is attempting at creating grievance with the UK government. We hear the usual refrain that they don't have the powers they need, despite this place being one of the most powerful devolved parliaments in the world. Ministers point blame elsewhere. It's everybody else's fault except the SNP. It's the same old SNP story. But let me tell the Cabinet Secretary, food producers, farmers and workers in Scotland's rural communities are tired of hearing this. They know the SNP ministers are not acting for the benefit of rural Scotland. All they are doing is acting like they don't care about rural Scotland. The harsh reality is that this government sees farmers and fishermen as an inconvenience. They treat them with disdain, they ignore them, and at no point can this government honestly claim to have put farmers, the fishing industry or the rural community first in any of its policy making. The SNP government can try to claim it's focused on securing our food supply all it likes, but the reality on the ground in rural areas is apparent, and it's far different to the alternative reality the SNP government tries to present. I will just shortly. The inconsistencies between the government's words and its actions are crystal clear. They are not designed to support farmers, crofters, seafood workers and the aquaculture sector or anyone in rural, coastal or island communities. I'll give way to John Swinney.
John Swinney.
I'm very grateful to Rachael Hamilton for giving way. What does Rachael Hamilton say to the National Farmers Union of Scotland's horticulture convener, Mr Ian Brown, who's commented on the fact that crops are rotting in the fields of our country because there aren't the workers to harvest those products, and the Home Secretary's rhetoric is making the situation worse?
Rachael Hamilton.
I thank John Swinney for his intervention. The SNP need to use the powers that they have. We've heard today from my colleague, Murdo Fraser, that there's more inward migration than ever, and even the First Minister recognised that and said that we need to attract more people to Scotland to live and to work, and we support that. What I would say to the First Minister is sort out the issues of depopulation, sort out the issues of not providing workers with rural housing, and actually support the rural economy. The SNP talks about developing a sustainable food supply, then acts in a way that would wreck our food supply. We know one of the reasons why. The words today were spoken by the Cabinet Secretary, but unfortunately the actions of the government are dictated by an extremist Green Party. It seems to be their way or Humza's majority hits the highway. Policies on food security are being drawn up by people here at Holyrood who have absolutely no understanding of farms, fishing or any crucial elements of the rural
Ms Hamilton,
economy.
sorry, I beg your pardon, Ms Hamilton, thank you for resuming your seat. And I would suggest that perhaps referring to members by their first name is not kind of how we do proceedings in Parliament. Thank you.
I apologise. I will call Humza Yousaf the First Minister of Scotland. Let's take the most obvious example first. The SNP and Green Party's protected marine area proposals that would ban fishing in large sections of Scotland's seas. How exactly would it secure sustainable food supply to reduce the amount of fish we catch right here on our shores and instead fly in costly imports from abroad? Before it was consumed, our food would have flown more miles than the Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution in an average week. Fishermen made their feelings very clear when they heckled the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs last week, and I hope she reflects on the strength of feeling she encountered. Then there is the apparent contradiction between the government's talk of supporting island communities and the SNP's disastrous handling of the ferry building contracts. It might be 10 years before they finish vessel 801 or 802. During that time, islanders are facing cancellations and delays that are damaging businesses and ruining their way of life. The gap between SNP words and actions doesn't end there. The government talk of producing more food locally, but won't even consider gene editing, which would keep food prices affordable while supporting farmers to earn a living. The government opposition to gene editing isn't based on science or evidence. It's based solely on political and ideological grounds because the SNP want to comply with whatever the EU says. Maybe the most clear example of the SNP's confused rural policies is the fact that they keep trying to split up the country, creating a hard border with our biggest trading partners and ripping up the internal market, so much so that the success of the food production relies upon. Nothing would do more damage to Scotland's food security than separation from the rest of the United Kingdom. All of these examples demonstrate the issue that rural and coastal communities have with this SNP, the massive gulf between rhetoric and reality. The reality is that SNP policies will mean that Scottish people get higher food prices, reduced quality, less choice. We won't meet net zero targets, presiding officer, since we'll need to input more costly food from abroad. And by contrast...
Members.
Yes.
Jim Fairley.
I'd like to thank Rachael Hamilton for taking an intervention. Do you think that 20% food inflation right now is acceptable?
Yes. Rachael Hamilton.
Jim Fairley knows full well, presiding officer, that food inflation has happened because of Putin's invasive attack on Ukraine, and there's no acknowledgement of that. By contrast, at the recent Scottish Conservative Conference, I launched a paper entitled Scotland's Food Future.
Members, we need to listen to the member who has the floor. Ms Hamilton, please
continue.
Thank you,
presiding officer, about how we can support farmers and agricultural workers to keep producing the high-quality local food grown right here in Scotland, for which we are highly renowned for. Our positive plans would bring in more local jobs in rural communities and keep food prices affordable as possible by giving farmers support. Scotland's food future proposals would also help to meet net zero climate change targets, because the food that we support farmers to grow locally is better for the environment. It's vital that we focus on food security, because it means we'll have access to a wide, healthy range of first-class food without having to import, as I said, costly food flown from abroad. How long have I got, presiding officer?
About a minute.
Okay. We also put forward plans for a Scottish genetic technology bill to help Scottish farmers and crofters, give them the ability to grow more food with the same land. And our plans would also create a rural investment bank to provide an alternative source of investment for innovative farmers and support the wider rural economy. And we would also set a 60-60 target for local procurement, so that mainland councils were required to look locally for the bulk of their food. All of these steps could be taken on by the Scottish Government, and I urge them immediately to do that, presiding officer, because food security really matters, and it doesn't matter to the SNP anywhere near as much as they claim it does. And I move the motion. I've already moved it, haven't I? But thank you very much.